everyone, I'm Francesca Ragno, your host today here in Prague Intercup for our forum with Miss Judith Forbis and Mr. Peter Upton. I don't know if you were following us before, but actually we had a long session, almost 1 hour and a half, in which our both guests actually explained us their history, like where and why and how they started with the Arabian horses. It was very interesting as both Miss Judith Forbis and also Mr. Peter Upton, they are icons for our Arabian horse industry. So this was very interesting. And then, at the end of our first section, actually Judith Forbis started to talk about the problem that we have nowadays. Problems, or we can just say situation, how our Arabian horse industry is and passion is today, with statistics of numbers and also situation that we might solve in our business today. Now we took a little break and we are back live exclusively on Arabian Insider, partnering with the Prague Intercup here today for you. Our host is Francesca Ragno, Eric Black, and Mr. Scott Benjamin.
This is the open discussion part of the forum.
If you want,
this is where we come to you
what Scott,
as breeders and
our
owners
second
and
host,
experts,
is telling us is that
and
if
this
you
is
have
your
questions
chance
for
to
us,
ask these
if you would
people
like
who collectively
to ask something to Judith Forbis or Peter
represent
Upton, please just send me a message and I will be your connection to this
experience
word.
and direct access to the horse in the Arab homeland. Their level of knowledge and willingness to share that knowledge is really, it's such a precious gift to all of us. And I want to thank the Czech National Association for bringing these two people here with us. You know, these are treasures in our breed. And what I love about Peter and Judy both is they believe in the power of sharing what they've been fortunate enough to learn and acquire in their lifetime with us, the next generation. And it'll soon be our responsibility to pass that on to the next generation and to try to find those people interested in wanting to continue to do that. That is the great challenge. That will always remain the great challenge, and that's why we're here together to try to do this. So I think we are ready now with the Arabian Insider.
Yeah, because it's also good to explain, ladies and gentlemen, that we are now next to our questions and the interactivity here in Prague, but also online. People can ask their questions via the social media channel of Arabian Insider. Welcome home, welcome to Prague, ladies and gentlemen. If you have any questions, I guess Francesca already asked you to bring in your questions. We're more than welcome to bring them in here on the forum and answer your question also from abroad. So, Scott.
So I'm going to ask the first question because I still think this is fascinating. When I have the opportunity to conduct interviews and do things for podcasts or for live interviews, I always start with the same question because I think we always learn something new. How did you get involved with the Arabian horse? What was your first exposure? And these two amazing human beings just shared two stories that I'd never heard about Judy, you know, cleaning stalls to get riding lessons and riding on Little Silver when she was 3, and Peter with a pony that used to take out the native villagers as it came around the corner, and all these amazing stories, you know. And these are two people, despite the fact that Peter was literally born with a silver spoon in his hand, that weren't born, you know, from privilege, right? These people, these two amazing human beings who we put on a pedestal now, started with a love for the breed in a simple way. And I think that's important for all of us to remember. We can get caught up in the VIP experience at a title show in Prague, but at the end of the day, it's the love of the Arabian horse that brings us all together. So I want you both to speak to the importance of the utility of the Arabian. That's how you got involved, not the beauty or the magic or the history, but the fact that you could ride this horse, you could love it. It was a family horse. It was something you could trade and enjoy and use in a wonderful way. Who would ever like to take that, Judy or Peter, if you could share with us?
Well, I think as I mentioned earlier, when I first saw this pony, I didn't know anything much about a horse or a pony, whatever. There's just something that automatically attracts us to certain animals, and for me it was a horse. And learning to ride, learning to jump, learning to race, it was all part of the experience that I could share with something I loved. And I think as we grow up, love is the most important thing that we can have in our lives. And today, many young people don't have even parents that live at home. And so they gravitate, or even veterans who've been through war and whatever, they're looking for something to love and to care for and to be responsible for. So to me, that was probably the most important part of my life, and I would expect it's very important to many others at this point in life. How about you, Peter?
I would add to that obviously my wife is sitting there, so I have to be a bit careful what I say. But the Arab is one of my great loves, and there's always been. It's been a part of my life for most of the years. My son continues with that love for the Arab horse. My granddaughter is also the same. So it's in the family. My twin, his two sons, both keen on horses. One, in fact, was champion steeplechase jockey and rode in the Grand National 3 times. Never won it, but he got round. So it runs in the family, and I think it often does in many cases. There's a family in England called the Murrays, and one was always known as a great aunt Maggie, and Maggie had 2 sons and a daughter. The daughter bred Arabs. One of the sons' wives bred Arabs. Her niece was Penny Leeuwenhoek from Sweden. She bred Arabs, and so it again ran in the family. And then I found out later that her great-great-great-grandfather had been to the very first Crabbit show and bought 2 Arabs. So, it does run in families. And that love of the Arab horse obviously goes back to the Bedouin. The Bedouin, there was many a Bedouin said, even if he was a sheikh and he had a number of mares, he had a favourite mare. There was always a mare. And he didn't allow his wife or wives to feed. They fed most of them, but his favourite mare was only fed by him and him only, whatever the situation. So that love, and I think it's the Arab that brings that out in you, because when you go in a field with an Arab, they're individuals. Other horses are sort of part of the herd animal, but no, Arabs, and they've been individuals for years. And I think having been individuals, why are they individuals? Well,
Peter,
because they've been individuals.
a little closer.
Oh, a bit closer, sorry. I'm not used to this. They've been, why are they individuals? Well, it's because the Arabs had the horses free around the Bedouin tent. I remember being in a Bedouin tent when it was snow with the Beni Saka, and I was nudged from behind, and I thought it was one of the other men trying to get by the fire. And I turned around, it was a mare. She was pushing me from behind. I want a bit of warmth from the mare, from the fire. And so they were individuals. In a herd of horses, you had to have a stallion who fought for them, you had to have the senior broodmare who led them. But with the Bedouin, they were individuals. And if you're an individual, you've got to start thinking for yourself. And so this is how I think over the generations they became a more intelligent horse than other breeds. And I think some people find the Arab a bit of a sharp ride. Though I must say, my nephew's childhood pony club camps when he was 8 years old was an Arab stallion. So, they come up to you, they come towards you. You go into a field, they come to you. This is the difference about the Arab, and I think it's what makes us fall so deeply in love.
Can I?
Absolutely.
One quote I've always loved is Joseph Addison said, "To me, the Arabian horse gives you something to do, something to love, and something to hope for." I'm going to stop.
That's beautifully said, Judy. Beautifully said. A bit like Theodore Roosevelt, which we were talking about earlier. There's something about the outside of a horse that's good for the inside of a person. He said man, but we'll say person. And that's very true, right? We all share this. I was saying to Joe earlier that we're all fortunate as Arabian horse owners and lovers and professionals to step off a plane anywhere else in the world and find somebody else who shares our passion. There's only two breeds that get to do that, the Arabians and the thoroughbreds, really. And the Arabians do it on a much more organic level. You know, I look around this room and see faces from all over the world gathered here in Prague. This is our chance to find a path forward, to start a conversation, but as Judy says, to find action steps that we can take to help make this better. This is the same story that's being told over and over again from Peter's excellent point of view that we need more state studs. Amen to that.
Amen.
And that there's a way to take these traditions and these experiences from the desert that are so central to the story of this ancient breed and bring them into a modern context without losing their importance, right? These are now our 21st century challenges, but there are ways to do this. And I'd like to open up now to our distinguished group here. Eric and I have microphones. If you have any questions, raise your hand, we'll come to you. And turn to Judy, do you have something like to share?
I think maybe it would be good to start something off that is positive, that is being done, that is working. And I think you should speak to that.
So in discussing, she wants me to share my story, Neil. Sorry, we'll come to you first. Eric, move right over to Mr. Ismer and Dr. Ismer, sorry, excuse me. I have been fortunate to have experienced the Arabian horse in a lot of places around the world as a resident. From a young boy growing up in North America to my early years as an adult working at the state studs in Poland, to then living in Canada, and now I live in Australia. And so I've seen the Arabian horse and the challenges that are present to breeders in a lot of different places. You know, Europe is home to me, Australia is home to me, North America is home to me. And as a judge, I've had the chance to judge in the Middle East and South America. And there was a time I was seeing horses on every continent of the planet at least once a year. And that was a real privilege for me. And it was a privilege I don't take for granted. But being in Australia now permanently, where now it has its advantages and its disadvantages. The advantages are that if something happens in the rest of the world, it usually doesn't affect us until years or months or decades later, if at all. But sometimes you feel isolated from the rest of the world and what's happening. And so what I was finding in this shrinking market in Australia and New Zealand, which is shrinking even more, is that there was no unity among people, breeders specifically, which has always been my passion, to try to push this forward. They were feeling pressure. It was about horse shows, and it was about, you know, how do we sell our horses and what do we do? And it was taken over a bit by these derivative-related horses, which is a wonderful way to get the Arabian out into a broader community. But they were driving the bus essentially, and the purebred breeders were being left behind. So it took me a while to curate a group of positive, forward-thinking breeders, and we came together in what now is called the Australasian Arabian Breeders Coalition. It's Australia and New Zealand. It's a bold step forward. And it's a small group of breeders to try to come together and create something that's breeder-focused. Our main focus, much like the Pyramid Society, is education and trying to find support for breeders and really stay focused on the classic horse of the desert, not a horse that fits a modern showroom. We run a horse show. We run an international horse show. Cananelli very well know. They were our first international judges last year. We have some straight Egyptian classes, but the show itself gives us not an air of legitimacy, but it helps the rest of the world see that what we're trying to do and what we're breeding in our remote part of the world, that's hard to get to. It takes an effort to get on a plane and come to Australia from everywhere in the world, and New Zealand. And so we want to make sure that our horses are stacking up against the quality of the rest of the world. But what's most important is that we're still breeding quality Arabians, and Arabians that have to be used. In our part of the world, we spend a lot more time in the show ring and on a daily basis riding and using our horses than we do running around a halter ring with them. And I still think that's something that the rest of the world can continue to do. Along the way, with this effort with our Australasian Arabian Breeders Coalition, we've befriended some really amazing people in Southern Africa. in Namibia, first and foremost, and now in South Africa and Zimbabwe. And these are also regions of the world where there are pockets of Great Arabian horses that have their own challenges. And their struggles were similar to our struggles. And now they've created, with the help of Niels' father, the late Holger, this amazing new Southern African Championships where these countries are working together and supporting each other as breeders. And we're in the process of creating with them this Southern Hemisphere Alliance of breeders to try to bring education together. What I tell our breeders at home is this. We compete at horse shows, 10, 20 days out of the year. For the other 345, we are friends. We're friends, we're not competitors. We're co-breeders of Arabian horses and lovers of Arabian horses who need to find a way to share in this experience together. There is something that we can learn from every breeder on this planet, whether we breed the same kinds of horses or not, but there's information to be shared. And the risk is that if we don't share and exchange, that knowledge is lost. That knowledge and the hard work that's gone in for those breeders over the decades is lost. I mean, to have these two amazing human beings share their knowledge and pass it all along to us from all ages of decades, including the ISMA children sitting right there, like that's a great gift. When I first went to Poland in my early 20s, I had knowledge shared with me by Director Krzysztofowicz and Director Jaworowski, who had seen horses in the 1920s. So horses that had been seen 100 years ago. And that's knowledge that I can now share and go forward. And so this is what Judy's talking about, is as breeders, we have, not only do we need to take back the power, Judy, but we have the power. You're the farmer. You are producing the actual product that trainers and people need to show and utilize. So this is our chance as breeders to come together and say, we can find the solution. And I will tell you the growth, the exponential growth that has happened in Australia and New Zealand in the last 18 months is inspiring. It's happened faster than I thought. I will tell you that kindness and positive energy has been contagious. It's been wonderful to see that same thing happen in Southern Africa. And it is a bit magical because we're separated from the rest of the world. But we all look to this part of the world and to what happens in North America and the Middle East as to what we want to attain. So there's an opportunity to take some of what's happening there and what we're learning there in small doses and apply it to a larger world without being jaded and without saying, well, that's not something that can happen. At some point, everything that's happened was something that couldn't happen. That we all have to take the initiative to make things happen. There was no Akaho, there was no Prague show, there was no World Championships, there were no any of those things. So we have the ability to change things, and we need to do that. So thank you, Judy, for giving me the opportunity to share that. But this is something if I can do it, I promise you can all do it, and we can all do it together. So Niels.
Yes, thank you, Scott. Coming after your speech, I have to say, don't forget about what we did in Europe at the European Breeders' Trust. We did similar what you did in well. But it's definitely the same thing. We want to bring breeders together. We'd like to improve their cooperation. We'd like to be friendly with each other and help each other. So everybody from Europe for sure is happy to join us there. We're now more than 60 breeders sharing it. But this was not my question. I have a little bit vast proposal, and I would like to have your opinion on that, because one of our problems, which you also mentioned in the dropping market, is for sure the stallions. And we have no second market for stallions colts. And one thought we had also in the group of European Breeders' Trust is, if it may help, just to think about stopping doing AI. What would that do for us? I mean, the consequences for some stallion owners would be not very happy, but we would create a second market for stallions. Because if you want to use that stallion, you cannot just call the owner and ask to send semen, but you have to travel and find probably a son or a grandson of this excellent sire. This is what happened in the past, and I remember my father going to Poland, buying Pallas sons because Pallas was not available, and using them and selling them somewhere else, and it created a market. This market today is dead, and I think we should start thinking, doing the same what the thoroughbreds are doing since ages. They do not have AI, and think about just doing natural covering, we will create a total different variety of stallions. And another point, which I think can be very valid, is we have sons of these stallions which will be never used because they're not successful in whatever they do, showing, endurance, whatever we're talking about. But they're probably the best producers. But we don't even know that because nobody will ever try them. And also, we will have a bigger variety of genes because what we're facing, at least in the show season at the moment, is that we are very focused on more or less 2,000 lines at the moment, and you're talking about genetic erosion, Peter. It's absolutely happening, especially in the show season, and we should be aware of it. We limit ourselves in breeding a lot, and we should be very careful about it. So I hear some people share that opinion, but I leave it open for discussion. I think it's worth at least talking and thinking about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. So I'm gonna turn that very important topic back to these two who would have been around long before there was transported semen and frozen semen and embryo transfer and all wonderful things. And give us your insight on those.
Exactly what Niels was saying, I've heard discussed before this forum. When we first started, all breeding was natural, and sometimes we'd have to breed twice a day, sometimes we wouldn't breed during the week. It's a little more dangerous to breed naturally. The other thing that we found when the AI started, and I believe it started because Dan Ganey was the president of the Arabian horse registry when Farzan was getting where he couldn't service very well. I think it's when AI started. I can remember when we first moved to Mina, by transporting mares to your farm, if you got stuck with a transport company that had strangles, there was strangles all the way across the United States. And to me, this is probably the most dangerous aspect of natural breeding, is having to transport your mares to other farms. You have to weigh the positives and the negatives on that. On the other hand, you could also limit the number of foals that a stallion could produce, rather than limiting where a stallion has to go to the mare. But Niels is absolutely right. There are so many young stallions or unproven stallions, and really, we don't know what something's going to breed until you breed it. You may be breeding to the great show horse, and he may not be worth anything, but on the other hand, maybe one of his sons or something else that's not proven, maybe he's not going to be the king of the walk, turns out to be the great breeding horse. I'll tell you, when I first saw Nazir, I wouldn't have said he was going to be what he is, or some of the other stallions I've seen, but you have to breed something before you can actually find out what it's going to do. So I think it's a positive thought. The question is how to carry it out without consequences to the farm and to the mares.
I thought it's interesting to get the word on this, totally agree in many ways with you. I can remember judging at the first Al Khalifa show in Saudi Arabia some years ago. It was the very first one. In fact, it snowed, I remember. But after we'd done the judging, I was on my way home. They gave me a catalogue marked with the results, and I had a good look through it, partly to see what damage I had done, but also to see what marks were given and who had been placed first, second, and third. And I found at that first Al Khalifa show, that every winner, and most of the seconds of all the classes but one were by only two stallions. Marwan al-Shaka and W.H. Justice. And then I thought, well, I'll look at the mare, the class, and that was won by, what was her name? Pianissimo won, and of course she was by the same sire as Marwan al-Shaka. So, this is a pretty worrying situation when you have that degree of close breeding because they're popular. And, you know, is a champion going to beat a champion? That's the problem. Now, in the old days, in I'm sure this country and most countries, people, what they did, they would have a number of stallions, whether it was farm horses or whether it was hunters or whether it was Arabs, and they would walk them around the country from place to place, all around. It made the horse fit. It also made the handler very fit. He had to walk with the horse. And it's why the story is that many farmers' daughters were also sired by the walker as well as the horses, by the stallion. How true that was, I have no idea. But it was a way of getting a breed around, but there were many horses doing it, so there was options available. Right, shows started very early, and shows have had a big influence. The earliest show I could find out was in 1600 and something in Dublin, in Ireland. It had a big prize in those days of, I think, £300 for the winner. The only problem is you then had to give the winner to the king. So it wasn't a very good deal in the end. But the problem as well is that in the old days they sold this in the desert because dealers, there was one called Upton Mini, who was an Arab but he lived in Bombay. There was another one called he was his name was Jamshaheti Jahihi Boy. It's the sort of name you can never forget. And they went around the desert each year and they bought up all the colts. Because, you know, what does each tribe want? One or two of the very best stallions, and the rest were taken. And they were taken to the coast, and they were fattened up and fed well. They each was given a camel mare, a lady camel with her milk for the colt, and they fattened them on bursim, what we call I don't know what you call it, alfalfa. And they eventually fattened them in the northern places where it went across the sea there, was dates. Now, because there were a lot of dates about, and the horses, like the camels, soon learn to, you don't have to stone them, they can, and they spit the stones out. And I can remember fattening a mare, a stallion who was a colt, looked like as a yearling, looked like a foal, as a 2-year-old looked like a young one, and he just wouldn't fatten up, and so we fed him on dates, and we fattened him up. But down in the south, in the Hadramaut, part of Aden, there they fed them on sardines as a good, and that was done way back in the 13th century. And so all these horses went across, and this solved the problem of a lot of the colts. And on average, I know you get colt years and filly years with foals, but actually, if you take it over many hundreds of years, you'll always find there are slightly more colts born than fillies. So there were quite a few to go abroad. So, but generally speaking, I think the thoroughbred world has been very wise and not having AI. Though of course it's now called AI on the television and everything is now what do you call it?
Artificial intelligence.
Say it out loud, Jay.
Artificial
intelligence. And I'm not sure that really applies in this circumstance. Yeah.
Scott, one thing as far as this limiting the age, would be a possibility of taking stallions to a central station where breeders could take, kind of like they do in Kentucky. There again, it depends on the distances, but you could have different stations in certain areas where you can take them there and you can leave it for a day or breed it or whatever, rather than having the mares come to the breeding farm itself. Believe me, if something goes wrong, if you have a disease, we went through it. After that, I was really grateful for AI. But
it has its blessings and cursings.
I guess also, Judy, you mentioned earlier that also one of the things is cost-effective at the moment. Not everybody can afford anymore what we are doing, not only going to a show, but also when you need to travel with your horses instead of artificial insemination. It's also cost-effective in this, and that's the question, the pluses and the minuses, what you got to do. Another thing that I want to bring in for you, Peter, you mentioned, I guess also, not only the registrations were dropping down, but also the memberships. You know, so this is the next question, maybe also related to this. If you are limited in the possibilities for this, nowadays the memberships, the people who are breeding horses, the breeders are dropping down as well. And how can we change that? Because registrations is one, but I know there are a few breeders with an enormous amount of horses, but it's about the breeders, the passion that we can share with people. How can we do something with that? Because we're dropping down on this as well.
You're absolutely right. But you see, I suppose most countries, I'll be a bit somewhat rude here, I think, but in the majority of countries there is a society where, and we have our society. I think in the past, I'm thinking of when I was first a member back in the 1950s, late 50s, 60s. Most people who were in the society then were people who had been brought up, I think, with the idea that it is good to do something worthwhile and free, you know. And because of charity, you don't get paid, you do it for love. Back to the word we were talking about earlier. And so you didn't have a problem there. But by the time we got to the turn of the century, the people who joined, instead of the early ones who, what can I do for the Arab horse? Their voice was, what do I get out of it? And there was this big change in attitude. And I think it's made it difficult for charities anyway, but it also makes it difficult for what they're a charity of.
So Scott, it's also a kind of bridge to your program, because you know it's for you what you mentioned what you do in Australia, New Zealand. That's all about breeders. So that's not a registration point, but that's how to motivate the breeders in this. And then we come back to a circle with technology, with motivation, with teaching, with.
Well, as breeders, we're still creating a product at the end of the day. Like, I don't mean to diminish it to just a product. It's much more than a product. It's a living, breathing animal that we want to find a good home for. And as breeders, we're very focused on making sure that the horses that we create end up in good homes, whether they're the world champion quality horses or the horses that become family horses, as Judy refers to them, right? And we all know as breeders, living a real world experience, you create more family horses than you do world champions, right? If it was easy to create world champions, we'd all have 50 on our farm. It's just not quite that easy, right? That's the beauty and the challenge of it. But we talk about memberships and trying to get more people involved. There are a lot of elements that play into that. And I think the first and foremost important thing that we need to all do, especially as we sit here in a privileged experience like this, is remember that you will not get new people involved if you don't expose them to the Arabian horse in a positive way. We all grew up in an era, likely, based on the majority of the age of us here, where either we grew up on a farm directly or we had a relative that lived on a farm with access to animals. We understood what horses were and what they were like and how it was like to live with a horse. Now there are generations removed from not only the farm, but knowing where their food comes from. And I think it's up to us to expose people in a positive way, not just a glamorous way like this, which is great. This is the end product. None of us got involved with the horses originally thinking we'd end up here at a VIP tent with these two icons in Prague, in 2023. Like that wasn't our motivation to get involved with Arabian horses. So we need to find that way to expose horses in a really positive way, whether it's the open days at Izmirslag, or a way to just get people involved with those inexpensive horses. And I found this true of myself in Australia. I get more mileage from a $2,500 gelding for this breed than I do for a six-figure horse that gets sold to the Middle East. It's just that simple. And I spend as much effort making a fuss over that $2,500 gelding as I do the horse that sells and competes for the Sheikh in the Middle East. And we all need to remember to do that. That's how we grow this breed. We never know where that $2,500 gelding will plant the right seed to get more people involved in the future. I was that person that owned that $200 gelding in 1978 as a kid, and here I am today. So there is a way for all of that to happen. Janice, I'll come to you.
Just to expound on what Judy was talking about, being kind, I honestly think that the internet has hurt our breed worse than anything. As far as people going on and arguing and putting people down and belittling horses and breeding programs, I think if you're a little kid at home and you're wanting to get a horse and your mother looks at the way we treat each other sometimes, why would they ever want to get in bed with us? I mean, I just think that it's really important to do that. And just to add one other thing about the AI thing, the other thing that I think is hurting us is not only have we killed the junior stallion market, but we've also killed the broodmare market with all these embryo auctions and everything. And I'm really getting tired. I won't even go to one. I won't do an ET. There's nothing prettier than a beautiful Arabian mare with a baby.
Brava.
Thank you, Janice. That was said with real passion. And I think, listen, this social media has not only created negativity in the Arabian horse industry, it's created negativity in every industry across the board. Like we have, like, just to be kind, like, stop and think before you post anything on social media. Be kind is always the right answer for sure, right? But it is our responsibility to make sure that what we're sharing about our Arabian horse is a positive thing in everything that we do. You know, I want to talk about this whole idea that Neil's brought up about frozen semen and embryo transfer and all of these things. And we're now 35 years into this journey of discovering what frozen semen and transported semen and embryo transfer do to our breed. And having lived in a remote part of the world where access to quality horses is hard, we see it as a bonus. We do. It gives us a chance to get. I want you to understand that there are still lots of positives, right? Most of you are coming from the perspective where you live around lots of other breeders in Europe or the Middle East, and access to a lot of good horses is something that's geographically feasible. It's not so feasible for us in our parts of the world sometimes, and so there are some pluses for us in our parts of the world. But I also want to bring to mind a place like Brazil, where you can still go to Brazil and see people breeding bloodlines that aren't really bred anywhere else in the world, and they're all doing their own things, and they're all using their own stallions, and they're not using frozen semen, and there are magical things happening there. So, you know, in the same way that the horses were unique that came directly out of the desert, and those genes were unique to the pool 200 and 250 years ago, centuries ago, we still have the opportunity to create quality horses from something that's unique. We don't all have to breed the same quality of horse. Even if you take the example of the Poles rebuilding their breeding program after 2 world wars with just a handful of mares, and it wasn't as if they had the option to shop around for stallions or mares. They had to take what they had and they had to make it better with whatever they had to breed with, and that's a real challenge. That's a testament of a true breeder, and we can all do that. Like, we can all celebrate the fact that there is a way to create something special from all of the bloodlines that exist, and I think that's the bond that we share as breeders, is that no matter what we breed, whether it's straight Egyptians or Spanish horses or Polish horses or Russian or whatever, some desert breds, those horses all have value, and they can all contribute in a positive way to the future of the breed. So I just want us to think about those things. Like, I am personally in favor of limiting frozen semen and artificial insemination and embryo transfer and all of those things to create genetic diversity. As someone who is trained and has a genetic background, I realize how that puts us in this bottleneck that will take us decades to recover from, plain and simple. But on that same token, we also need to find ways for those horses that may be outside of the spotlight to find ways to be celebrated, valued, and appreciated. We only get to do that when we start to travel around and see what each other is doing in other places around the world and appreciate the bloodlines that are out there, for sure.
And maybe, Scott, I think it's good to go back to the questions also now. But one thing, Janice, I see a lot of things from nowadays. 2023, we have technology, we have social media. Our children are living in a different world than we are here now, more or less. And maybe it's an idea, but for another time, to organize something to discuss the future with all these elements. We have technology, but how is the benefit for it? How we can use it in a positive way? We have social media, we need it, but how can we use that in a positive way? So maybe in another occasion we can bring that on as a topic, maybe also good for the social media part of this. Yeah, so if you can do something like that, then we move that on to a next occasion and go back now, because it is 2023, it is social media, we have artificial insemination and all other technologies, but we need to use it on a very positive and good way for us. So maybe we go back to questions.
Eric,
sorry, yes, Francesca.
I think that as the youngest generation, the problem, of course, social media has good, positive side and negative side, but I think that one of the problems is that to be with horses, you need consistency. You need to love to be in a ground, to be in a farm with horses and taking care of your horse every single day. I grew up with it and I'm back now that I breed horses and I feel it. And most of the young people that are my age or even youngest, nowadays for the lifestyle that we have, everybody wants to travel and nobody wants responsibility. Nobody wants to be bounded with a place because they don't want it. They don't want to have even a house because they have to take care of it. And to have Arabian horses or whatever other animal, you need to stay home, you need to take care of it. So I think this is a generational problem that of course we cannot really solve here or our society because it's worldwide. But what we can do is that, as Scott was saying before, that maybe trying to organize funny events. Like, I remember when my father always told me that he was doing cross-country competition with his Arabian horses and he was doing festival at his house. He was just taking his Arabian horse and go for a riding in a forest, organizing mountain trips with Arabian horses and with friends. All these things that are of course far away from the ultra competition or just the fancy events, which are absolutely good. But I think that if we all would tie together and try to organize fun events like just a simple 3 days riding for people who loves riding Arabian horses or whatever other competition that could attract the young people because they come and they have fun. That is not only stay seated watching a horse show or talking about breeding lines or whatever that can attract passionate people like us. But we need new people. And they will not come only for the pedigrees or the history or the fashion. They will come for fun things. Because also they can share the fun things on social media. And because this is the new world. So I think this is a great point to consider because it's the reality of nowadays. Like the young people, they don't want responsibility. They don't want to be tight, they don't want to be there and have consistency in doing something at home every single day. Unless they have a goal that can be fun. And then maybe they are willing to do it. And then it's not everyone, but I think the general point is this. So, just a consideration.
Just a small side step for your homework. If you take a look on the internet, Google, by the way, that's internet, you can also find information about this topic and what youth nowadays is, the way how they think and do. We call it generations. We have Generation X, Generation D. Trying to find it on the internet, and it gives a lot of answers how people behave nowadays in 2023, the younger generation. Anyway, questions? Yes.
Well, Judy made a point, and she started this presentation by listing all the different breeds, and they're all on the same trajectory. So it's not just Arabians. I feel that it's not just a matter, I think, of introducing Arabians to people, because we've done that. We've had, I can't tell you how many families we've had over to our farm to see our horses, which we have on our farm, and let people ride them, sit on them, feed them carrots and the whole thing. But every single one of those couples or families lives in an urban environment where they can't keep a horse. So if they have a horse, they have to board it. And we talk about inexpensive horses, but we all know there's really no such thing. If you don't have a place to keep it at home, you have to board it. And I think that's an issue nowadays that we have to recognize. I think that's not just affecting Arabians, it's affecting all breeds. So I think there has to be some really creative ways of getting people involved, maybe in a fractional, and then maybe 4 people on a horse. And there are events at the barns where they keep them, to Francesca's point, a social kind of aspect, where it really becomes fun, but also affordable fun.
Scott, I want to make one step back to the topic before. Bart want to say something about it.
So I think all of you were right on all the topics, but coming back to this frozen semen or transport semen, it's legally nowadays not possible to reverse. The stud books can fight it, but they will get massive court cases against them because you basically take work away from the stallion owners, and they will fight it. Going back to it, not long ago on our website actually, there was a topic about it from the thoroughbred. They wanted to limit the thoroughbred stallions in the United States of America on 150 breedings each. How they can breed 150 mares with live cover, I don't know, but apparently they manage. They got immediately a lawsuit against them, and they lost. So it's back open to breeding as much as they want. So even in the thoroughbred, with all the money behind that, they cannot win these lawsuits. The same thing will go for embryo transfer, all these things. It is like Eric says, this is something of this day, and we're gonna have to learn to live with it. Social media, if you cannot take it out anymore, we're gonna have to live with it. But something that came up in my mind, and I said it to several people now in the past year, traveling around and going to all these different farms, that is our own mindset. And our own mindset, especially also from judging. You stand with a person in the barn or in the aisleway looking at a horse, the first thing they say, oh, this is wrong and that's wrong and that's wrong. They can all point out the mistakes. You don't build a house with the bricks you don't have. You have to start looking at the positive points of your horse and then build from there forward. And it's something that we all do. We all are, because I know most of you, and I was close to most of you. All of you have sometimes a comment to say, oh, this horse, the ears are not good, or that's not good. Okay, what's the good points? And let's start from there, because that's breeding really. You build on top of each other, and small steps. And this is something I think that's very important, that we look back to that.
I fully agree, thank you, Bart. And that brings again also to your topic, positivity. You need to do the positive side and start from there, I guess.
Bart, one of the reasons that the thoroughbreds and the Arabs could not overcome that problem of the numbers problem is because in the United States it violates the antitrust laws, and it was disputed in court several times. No way you can beat it. It is what it is because it's a violation of antitrust and trade. So they can't change it. Or they'll go to court and they'll lose.
For those of you who don't know me, my name's Alan Preston. I was involved with the Arabian horse for over 60 years now. My parents were both breeders. I was on the board of directors for the Arabian Horse Society for over 10 years, and we did a lot of research that covers a lot of these topics here today. And Bart is actually 100% correct. We looked at the laws in most countries, and it's called withholding the right to trade, so you can't restrict that. The thoroughbreds got around that by the stallions being shuttle stallions, and being able to cover stallions in the southern hemisphere a different time than they're covering in the northern hemisphere. So that's how they got around the rule when they brought that in. Getting back to the stats that were put forward, which were fantastic and very accurate, I had a great time talking to Judy about these yesterday. Now, when we look at those, it's really alarming to see the drop in numbers of those, especially Arabian horse breeding numbers, and they have dropped in other breeds. But if you look at the history of the Arabian horse, and it was touched on in both their talks, the Arabian horse was used developing many breeds, the Morgan horse, the Australian stock horse, even the quarter horse. So there was a great need for Arabian blood as an improver in all those upcoming and new registries. All those registries have now closed their books for many years, so that negated the need for Arabian blood in other programs. Also, when you keep looking back in any business to try and move a business forward, it's not successful. You need to look at the modern time we now live in and what the need of the Arabian horse is for the people in the time we live. And if you lose sight of any breed, the purpose of that breed, you will lose sight in moving it forward. So unless we hold on to the fact that this horse is an all-purpose horse that can be used for any riding discipline, we will lose sight of being able to move it forward in a progressive way. And I think that's part of the key with helping us get this horse exposed to more people, to use this horse for pleasure and to enjoy the horse for its intrinsic values of being a great horse to ride and a horse that stays sound and reliable. And that's the key to moving it forward, really.
I have another point, which I know it's a little bit tricky, and nobody ever talk about it, so I will just take the chance to put it over and see what you guys think about. Embryo transfer. This is something that nowadays is really used, and that, in my opinion, affect quite a lot our market, because of course you lose the unicity of your mare. When you can breed your mare 5, 4, 3, 2 times per year, of course you get 2, 3, 4, 5 foals. You don't get only one. And this one, for sure, was more unique. Then, if you have 1 diamond, or you have 5 diamonds, then of course that will be the best one. But still, you have 5. You don't have only one. And this nowadays happens a lot in our community. And for me, it's sad to see that maybe a mare is fledged and produce so many babies a year, and then she's not allowed to carry her own baby, never in life, because she's too beautiful and it's too risky, and maybe she can die and whatever. But still, you are taking away the maternity from an animal, which is so important in humans, in animals probably even more. And this happens. And the overproduction with embryo transfer, I don't know genetically if it can affect the genetical power of our horses, but for sure when an Arabian horse is born from a recipient which is not Arabian, I don't know if the genetic change, but for sure the imprinting change. Because the milk is not the same as an Arabian horse, the attitude is not the same, and the little baby grow up with a quarter horse, and for sure the imprinting will not be the same as a flea-bitten Arabian mare that trots and snores in a field. These are all points that nowadays are reality in our business, and I think, I don't know in other equine, in other breeds if it's the same. For sure I don't think in thoroughbred this is allowed, but I don't see, beside the business reason and money, why we are doing that. Because we are overproducing, we are making our horses weaker, and we are taking away really the natural aspect of breeding, of having your mare breeding with the standard you want, and dream that this is the right combination, and you wait 1 year to see this for one product. And maybe you're right, maybe you're not, but then, okay, well, I'm waiting 5, let's see. I don't know.
I guess, Judy, you want to react on this, as I see you're not.
I think there has been some research done on that, and I wish I could quote it because it's been done a while back by quite a well-known researcher on the effect of the lack of natural breeding versus the artificial breeding, and the diminishing aspect of the breed in relation to it not being natural, that it's artificial, that it's certain things are going to carry forward that are negative in the way of production and just the whole DNA of the horse, so to speak. I wish I knew more about it, but she's right on in a lot of respects there. We started out with natural breeding, and I'm not against AI up to a point, but you could still limit AI. You could still limit the stallions if you could get away with it legally. But I still think that from a universal standpoint or a global standpoint, we need some specific focal point that attracts all ages to at least explore owning or participating in some way, or even going to a show or a presentation, or to be attracted to the Arabian horse. And it comes back down, if you look back, and I don't want to look back, but history repeats itself. And if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it in some ways. Some of the good and some of the bad. But we have the blacks, and we still have the Black Stallion, and we still have some movies, but I think we need something fresh that's a great movie that could win an Academy Award or this beautifully photographed. And Francesca certainly knows exactly what I'm talking about. And if any of you have ever seen this documentary called The Octopus Teacher, I recommend you see it, because you're not going to go out and buy an octopus, but it is going to touch your heart because of the patience and the love that this particular person or filmmaker had in reaching this octopus on a basis of love. I tell you, it's one of the greatest films I've ever. It did win the Academy Award in documentary production. And this is what I'm speaking of, that empathy, that people are looking for something to love these days. There's so much negativity in the world. I'm sorry to say that, but we're in a changing world. But love never goes out of style. And if you have something that is going to bring something to you that's warm and fuzzy, oh, maybe I'd like to do something like that. Maybe I'd like to explore that. I think we're sadly in need of it, and it's certainly fundable. There's enough money in this business. There's enough money with some of the big breeders or some of the sheikhs or whatever to fund something that's spectacular. But it has to be professional.
That's the point. Peter, I guess you want to react as well.
Well, I'm no
It's your
expert.
microphone.
I'm no expert. Is that it? Yes. I'm no genetic expert, but I understand from recent research, that although we fully understand that the main influence on the production of a foal is genetic, but and of course it's respective of what it takes from that. But what is becoming more and more clear is that there is the environmental influence on breeding a foal. Now, what I mean by environmental influence is the mother. Now, if the mother happens to be a purebred Arab mare who comes straight up to you every time, the foal does as well. If you have a farm horse who turns her back and kicks you, the foal will learn to do the same thing. Foals are very quick in particularly their first few weeks and months, to pick up exactly everything. There was a famous mare called Bint Helwa, who are bred by Ali Pasha Sharif from the plant sport, and she, once arriving in England, was frightened by something and went through a hedge and smashed her off shoulder and leg. She proceeded to continue to have 4 foals like that, but she was in a sling at first. And her first foal, when it started walking, walked with a limp on the same foot. It came over it, but it copied mum. Now, if that environmental influence is greater than we think, and what about the blood, for example, as well? I'm talking on the same line as you, that there is more to embryo transfer than we are yet aware of. And I think that we need to be careful. We need to be careful. Otherwise, we could do immense damage to a breed. And once it's in there, you don't get out of it.
That's completely true, I guess. So, are there any other questions? Topics? Oh.
Anyone? You've asked all your questions. Peter, do you have something else you'd like to share?
Yeah,
You may.
My name is Klaus Beste. One of the best things in my life ever happened to me is that I'm together with Cornelia Tauschke of El Taiba Stad, and I'm happy to help her with running the farm, which is now already existing since 50 years. Beside that, I was also working for 22 years for the German Aeroport Society, and I had the great luck to work together with Dr. Hans-Joachim Nagel, whom I think you all know. I would like to, on one hand, focus on what you have just said about the modern equine reproduction systems which we have. As Bart rightly said, and several others said already, we don't need to argue about this, we have to live with this. It's existing. We cannot throw this away. I'm very much against all these modern techniques because I think it has a huge influence on the breed, as already also Francesca was saying, and I think it is especially the biggest influence which I can see is in the environmental aspect. Let me also go back a little bit to what several times has been said, especially by you, Scott, and this is education and bringing people together. Thinking back to the time when I was working for the German Aeroport Society, we had about 2,500 foals every year, and although Germany is not as big as the United States, but still it's quite a big country with a distance of from north to south about 1,000 kilometers, etc. What we have done is we split our country into different regions, and within these regions we had people, we motivated them. There were breeders like, for example, Claudia de Rios with her family in her region where she's living, which is Rhineland and Westphalian area around Düsseldorf, Münster, this area, and we did the same also in all the other regions inside Germany. We used the help of these experts, inviting the people in this region to make sure that they are not traveling too long distances, bring them together and do events where we could try to educate them. On one hand, through workshops, through discussion forums, to events like we have done in my region, which is in the Lower Saxonian area. We were blessed with the possibility to use the facilities of the Isma family. They were kind enough to offer us possibility to go to their farm and use the facilities and do these kind of seminars and also do horse events. And we did them especially to attract young people, to encourage new young breeders, and it worked really well for quite some time. It of course also depends always on the ones who are the driving forces. If in a region you have someone who is just lazy and doesn't want to work, it's not helping at all. But we were fortunate enough to have in many of the regions really good people, and they did a lot to encourage young and newcomers, breeders who just in the beginning had a riding horse, as you just said. We all fell in love with the horse which we had used for riding, but we draw the attention of these people also to breeding them. And sooner or later it came up, and the number of breeders, members then of our society, as well as the foal with being bought every year, was rising a lot, and it came up to quite a nice number. And we had a very good atmosphere inside our society among the breeders. They respected each other very much. Of course you have some so-called black sheep everywhere, but basically it really went very well throughout many, many years. Right now it's going a little bit down, but I hope it's coming back very soon. I can only recommend this kind of system. I think you are using this in Australia and New Zealand, and this is something which should be used also globally around the whole world. I hope it's coming up. Thank you.
Something you wanted to share, Peter? No?
I was just going to say, I'd rather, could I ask a question of the people here? Who knows what telogamy is? Well, telogamy is somebody worked the machine here to pick up pictures of horses. Who's the secretary was doing that? Yeah, here we are.
Well, in the Arab world, didn't they believe
it
was? If once you contaminated a mare,
she was contaminated forever. Well, it's very interesting because way back in 1821, Lord Morton did an experiment in Britain, and he had, and it should come up on that screen, I think, a quagga. Now, you may not know what a quagga is either, but a quagga is now extinct, but it was related to the zebra, and it was found in Africa. A picture of it should come up like this. That's the quagga, and you can see it's quite heavily striped, and you can see it's obviously related to a zebra. Well, now this man used that quagga on this mare, a chestnut Arab mare. The mare, in fact, was about 7/8 Arab, but she was virtually an Arab mare. Their foal, it should come up on the picture there, is this one. And if it comes up on the screen there, it's a hybrid sired foal by the quagga out of the Arab mare. And if you look, you will see that there are zebra marks on it here, here, and here, and it's patently, obviously, hybrid. It's not an Arab. Then he sold the mare, the chestnut mare, to another breeder who, Sigur Ousley, who covered her with this stallion. Now, this stallion is called a black stallion. Actually, he was dark brown, but he was called a black stallion. And he, in fact, was also used in the production of the thoroughbred under the name Jebdiz. But he then covered the mare, and the first foal of that was a colt. And there he is. Now, you can see he's a bit more Arab than the hybrid, but he has zebra marks on his legs here. I'm afraid it's difficult to see. I'll leave them on the table later. And so he had some marks of the previous breeding. The next foal was a filly, and that's her. And there she is with zebra marks here and on here and there on the withers. So, and in fact, the last foal she had was by the Arab again, and that's her last foal with her in the picture. It doesn't seem to have any zebra marks on it. There are suggestions of some there. Now, these pictures were all painted by one artist and were done for the, where's my paper? There it is. For the Royal College of Surgeons and for humans. But they were so fascinated by this influence, or they saw possibly influence, that they in fact had the artist Jean-Louis Agasse paint all these pictures of the horses. And they are there, you can go and see them in London. But what is interesting, this was commonly believed in by the Arabs. Hence, it was a help in making sure they were breeding pure Arabs. And also, Lady Anne Blunt picked it up from the Arabs, and she believed it as well, and turned down two very nice mares because she learnt that they'd been previously covered by catnishes, immature stallions, not pure stallions. So it's an interesting thing. Genetically, it sounds quite impossible, but there are pictures that seem to suggest perhaps it's not totally impossible. And it was believed in by the Arabs. And the fact it was believed in by the Arabs did, I think, play a major role in ensuring the breeding of purebreds.
That's a very good point, Peter. We are just a few minutes away from wrapping this up, okay? Dinner is about to start, lunch, and they need to clear the area and get lunch set up for all of you. I want to thank you all for being here, for participating, but before we wrap up, I want to pass the microphone back to Judy, because Judy brought up a very good point. It's all well and good to get together and talk about what needs to be done, but what are the takeaway action plans that we can come away with? Judy's going to share her points. We'll reach back out to the audience, and then we'll wrap this up and thank these two amazing people.
Well, I said when we began, I hoped we'd come up with at least one and maybe more than one. And I think we've done just that. We're not going to solve all the problems at this one small forum, but we can certainly go away thinking about what's been discussed so far. So number one, I think, Scott, what you spoke to in developing breeders groups in the different regions or in the different countries or whatever, bringing people together in some way and educating them and having fun together. That's a very strong beginning, because it's the undergirding of what will carry this breed forward, because we don't have people that care and that are educated. We've already seen the decline, and we can bring it back. We don't want to expect too much. Maybe we're sometimes expecting too much, but we can improve where we are today. Number two, I think, is be kind. I think you brought up the point on the internet. There is so much negativity and nastiness. Just ignore it. That's those people's problem. Just if we each remember to be kind and to look for the positive in what other breeders are doing. We may not want to breed what they breed. We may not like what they're breeding. But if it makes them happy and the breed and they're good horses and they have a use and they contribute in some way, be grateful. I think another thing we have really discussed well here is the use of Arab mares recipients. I have seen myself where some of these bigger, uglier quarter horse or whatever mares that people are grabbing now to use, the foals resemble some of the mental attitudes of the mares that they're the recipient mares that they're brought up with. I think that's a really important point, is to carry on. It's environmental, and I would certainly think we can encourage the use of Arab. And besides, there's a lot of Arab mares that would make great recips. Maybe they're not great enough to breed themselves, but use them as recipients. So I think that those are. One other thing is sharing. We can always share in some way or another to bring others into it. And last of all, I think a global film, something that's going to inspire others, even to just think about the breed. Maybe they'll get in, maybe they won't. But maybe their kids will, or down the road, they may remember that film or something to do with it. So I think those are 5 things. We don't have the film now, but it's something we could aspire to. And I know Francesca, we've already been down that road. So it will happen someday. But I think there's 5 things there that we can be very proud of, that we've discussed that we can do with a little extra effort on everyone's part. So I think we have a great, the fact that we're all here says something very positive. So that's my take on it.
He was right about that. Not the fact that we're all just in Prague, but you could have chosen to sleep in or see Prague this morning, and you came here on a hot Saturday with fans, and we're still sweating, just sitting still. And I want to thank all of you for coming and sharing. I won't cut off Peter. Don't worry. Peter, would you like to wrap up as well with your words of wisdom?
This has been, I think, I hope it has been a very interesting meeting. And I mean, I found when all those years, nearly over 45 years of judging Arab horses abroad, and it was like, as somebody else said, it was like, I'd call it an open passport. It opened the door for us to meet so many friends that I still have here, although I've been gone for 6 years from the world, and they are friends forever. I mean, the number of people who came up, and what I'm saying is, please continue this way.
So, Joe, do you want to share something? Eric, can you just pass that microphone to Joe quickly?
Hi, I'm Joe, and I just wanted to share the fact that my wife and I are fairly new. We've been doing this for under a decade. I was in the 80s. that got out to build businesses. And as we build businesses, I think about this and I'm listening. Can you guys hear me okay? I'm thinking about everything that we're saying here, and I love the idea that the people in this room are a generation that I think you spent your lives protecting the horse. The question, that's very important, but one thing that you're talking a lot about is how do we get new people in? My wife and I can speak for us, our lives have been enriched by the Arabian horse. We didn't need it, right? We had a life, but being introduced to the Arabian horse has enriched us in a way we never expected, and I think that we need to do a better job not selling, but telling the story of the lifestyle of this horse and what it has to offer. And I think we need to know who our clients are, who are we looking for to come into this business, because the truth is it takes someone, middle to higher income to come into this industry and become breeders. So how do we attract them? It's not going to be with the things we may think, but the lifestyle. And there is a nature deficiency in this world with our youth. And I think we all agree to that. And I think there's another solution for these people who are looking for a lifestyle to support their families and their children and their grandchildren. And if we can utilize technology, which I've been introduced to some technology lately that I think can be managed in a positive way, where the positive stories are told. And I think that I've watched many other verticals in business explode utilizing technology. And I think if we do it in the right way, we have a utopian future.
Yeah. Thank you. I just want to revisit Judy's important points at the end. We've come together as a community. We're already doing exactly what she said needs to be done. Like Klaus said, we have to take that idea and take it home and implement it locally so that it can build and grow. We're doing that. We're educating ourselves here as well. That's another important key factor of what Judy talked about. But I want to thank these two very special people who I've had the privilege to know for decades for sharing their lives and their knowledge with all of us. That's what this is all about. And Judy and Peter, I hope we have you with us for many more years to come. Thank you so very, very much for being with us. Thank you to the Czech National Arabian Horse Association, to Arabian from Qatar for sponsoring this, and thank you all for being here. Have an amazing show. Lunch is ready for us shortly. And make sure you get to come up and talk to these two incredible human beings. Your day will be richer for it, I promise. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, 2 o'clock, we continue with the show on the showground here next to us. So enjoy your lunch. And for those who are watching the live stream, this was the forum. Thank you for being with us. And there is a lot to think about in the future. So maybe on the next occasion. Now we go back this afternoon here to the Prague show, the new A show here in the Czech Republic.
And this was our live for the Prague Intercup Forum with Judith Forbis and Peter Upton. We are all here for the love of Arabian horses. We are all here to promote the Arabian horses worldwide. We talked about many interesting facts, and this is why we do our Arabian Insider News. Let's talk. We want to talk, we want to communicate, we want to share opinion with you all and stay together worldwide thanks to the passion of the Arabian horses, because the Arabian horses brings the world together. So I'm Francesca Ragno, and that's it for today. I'll see you next time. Ciao!
I would like to thank you, and I would like to ask them to use out of this area to prepare it.